Imagine seeing an ad in the newspaper. Male college students wanted for a psychological study of prison life, $15 a day, 1 to 2 weeks. You sign up, you pass every test, you are selected. And then, within days, you either become a torturer or you break completely. This is not science fiction. It happened in August 1971, in the basement of a building at Stanford University. And what came out of that basement shook psychology, scientific ethics, and the way we understand human nature for over 50 years. This is the story of the Stanford prison experiment. And the deeper you go into it, the more disturbing it becomes, not just for what happened, but for what we eventually discovered about how it was built. The man behind the experiment was Philip Zimbardo, a 38-year-old psychology professor who had taught at Columbia and NYU before joining Stanford. Zimbardo was brilliant, charismatic, and deeply interested in one specific question: not what people are, but what situations do to them. The central theory he wanted to test was simple and at the same time radical. He believed that human behavior is shaped not by personality or individual character, but by the environment and the role a person occupies within it. Put a good person in a bad situation, he said, and the situation wins. To test that, he needed to create a situation. In August 1971, an advertisement appeared in the classifieds of the Palo Alto Times and the Stanford Daily. The text was straightforward. Male college students needed for a psychological study of prison life. $15 a day, 1 to 2 weeks. More than 70 men responded. All were subjected to extensive psychological evaluations. 24 were selected as the most stable, healthiest, and least prone to antisocial behavior. The most balanced group Zimbardo could find. Then a coin was flipped. Half became guards, the other half became prisoners. The basement of Stanford's psychology department was transformed into a prison. Cells were built inside offices. A solitary confinement chamber was created inside a closet. The corridor became the yard. Prisoners were given burlap uniforms, ankle chains, and were referred to only by numbers. No names, no identity, just a number. Guards were given khaki uniforms, mirrored sunglasses, and wooden batons, and one instruction that would define everything that followed. Zimbardo told the guards they could not use physical violence, but that they should create an environment in which the prisoners felt completely powerless. On the morning of Sunday, August 15, 1971, the experiment began. And on the first day, almost nothing happened. The guards felt uncomfortable in their uniforms. The prisoners treated the whole thing like a mildly inconvenient summer camp. Zimbardo watched and worried there would be nothing interesting to document. Then, on the second day, the prisoners rebelled. They barricaded their cell doors with their beds, ripped off their identification numbers, started taunting the guards. And in that moment, something shifted inside that basement. The guards who had been passive on day one responded to the rebellion with unexpected force. They used fire extinguishers to push the prisoners back, stormed the cells, confiscated the beds, and began treating the men in front of them not as college students earning $15 a day, but as enemies who needed to be controlled. Within 48 hours, the line between role-playing and reality had begun to dissolve. What followed over the next several days was captured on audio recordings, video, and in Zimbardo's own notes. Prisoners were forced to do push-ups and squats as punishment. They were deprived of sleep, publicly humiliated, forced to defecate in buckets inside their cells when guards refused to take them to the bathroom. One prisoner was put in solitary confinement in a dark closet for refusing to eat. Within 36 hours of the experiment starting, the first prisoner had suffered an emotional breakdown. He cried uncontrollably. He screamed. He showed signs of profound psychological distress. Zimbardo and his team observed him. and then made a decision that says a great deal about what was happening to everyone inside that basement. They concluded he was faking it to get out of the experiment. He was not faking. He was released the next day, and over the following days, 4 more prisoners had to be let go for the same reason. Real emotional collapse, real distress. In an experiment designed to last 2 weeks, half the prisoners had broken in less than 5 days. But what was happening to the guards was equally revealing, just in a different direction. Some guards remained reasonably humane throughout the experiment, but others changed in ways they themselves could not fully explain afterward. They began inventing elaborate humiliations, creating intricate power games, punishing capriciously. One guard in particular, nicknamed by others as John Wayne, became notorious for his cruelty. He arrived early, stayed after his shift, and constantly thought up new ways to make the prisoners' lives harder. Years later, when this man was interviewed, he said he had consciously modeled his behavior on a character from a film, that he had created a persona, that he had decided to be the toughest guard he could imagine. And here is where the story shifts direction for the first time. Because this detail, that a guard had consciously decided to play a role, contradicts the central narrative Zimbardo would build from the experiment, the narrative that the environment alone transformed ordinary people into tyrants, that there was no choice involved, that the situation simply took over. But there was more. While the experiment was underway, Zimbardo was not just a researcher observing from outside. He had taken on the role of prison superintendent. He walked through the basement, not as a psychologist monitoring subjects, but as an administrator managing a facility. And in recordings recovered decades later from the Stanford archives, something troubling came to light. One of Zimbardo's assistants, David Jaffe, was captured on audio speaking directly to one of the guards during the experiment. The words were unambiguous. Jaffe told the guard that they needed him to be active and involved, that every guard needed to be what they called a tough guard. The guards were being coached on how to behave. The cruelty was not spontaneous, it was requested. This sat in the archives for nearly 50 years without any outside researcher examining it. The experiment had been cited in psychology textbooks, taught in classrooms around the world, used to explain everything from police brutality to the abuses at Abu Ghraib. And the obvious question, had anyone actually checked the archives, had never been asked. In 2016, a French researcher named Thibault Letexier began doing exactly that. Letexier spent 2 years working through Stanford's archives. He interviewed participants, analyzed previously unreleased audio and video recordings, tracked transcripts, and what he documented in his 2018 book, published in English as History of a Lie, completely reframed what the Stanford prison experiment actually was. The guards had not spontaneously become cruel. They had been instructed to be cruel before the experiment even began. Zimbardo had given them a list of rules and procedures designed to dehumanize the prisoners. The experiment's conclusions had been largely written before the experiment was over, and some of the prisoners who appeared to break down later admitted they had exaggerated their distress because they thought it was what the researchers expected to see. When the original participants were interviewed for a National Geographic documentary released in 2024, many of them confirmed Letexier's findings. One said directly that until Letexier began his work, there was nothing they could say that would supersede the authority of a tenured professor at a prestigious university. They were part of the circus. But that was all. Zimbardo never fully accepted the criticism. He insisted that even if the guards had been coached, the central conclusions about the power of situations to shape human behavior remained valid. He died in October 2024 at 91 years old, still defending the work of his life. But here is what the experiment revealed, regardless of how you judge Zimbardo's methodology. In 1971, the same summer the experiment ended, a riot erupted at Attica Prison in New York. prisoners took guards hostage, demanding basic human rights. Governor Nelson Rockefeller ordered the National Guard to retake the prison by force. Many guards and prisoners were killed. Zimbardo's experiment suddenly seemed to offer a clean, seductive explanation for events the country was trying to understand. It wasn't bad people doing bad things. It was the situation. It was the environment. It was the system. That message was powerful. It was comforting in a strange way. And it was amplified for decades through media coverage, textbooks, documentaries, and eventually a 2015 film starring Billy Crudup as Zimbardo, which won awards at Sundance. 95% of criminologists cited the experiment without skepticism from 1971 onward. It was used to explain the abuses at Abu Ghraib, used in congressional hearings, in courts, in public policy, all based on 6 days in a basement at Stanford with data that no one had actually checked for nearly half a century. And when someone finally checked, what they found raised questions that Zimbardo never fully answered. What we know now is this. Something real happened in that basement. People were genuinely harmed. Prisoners suffered real distress. The experience left marks that some participants carry to this day. None of that is invented. But the story built around those 6 days, the clean and powerful narrative that put good people in bad roles and they inevitably become monsters, that story was shaped, promoted, and protected by a man who was also the prison superintendent, the experiment's director, the architect of its conclusions, and its chief promoter. Zimbardo was inside the experiment. He was the experiment. And for decades, no one checked the archives sitting at Stanford, waiting to be opened. The Stanford prison experiment did not prove that anyone will become cruel if you put a uniform on them. What it proved was something more complicated and in some ways more disturbing about how science works, how narratives become truth, and how easy it is for a powerful story to survive decades without anyone asking whether it is actually true. The basement of Jordan Hall at Stanford, where it all happened, still exists. The building is still standing. And the men who spent 6 days there as guards and prisoners spent decades being part of a story that, according to many of them now, was never entirely theirs to tell. So here is what I want to ask you. If you knew you would be randomly selected to be either a guard or a prisoner in an experiment like this, would you participate? And more importantly, are you certain which role you would choose to inhabit if you had the chance? Because the people in that basement were also certain. Let me know in the comments what you think you would do.